Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Cloud Accounting Weekly, the podcast edition. Cloud Accounting Weekly is a weekly newsletter that I send out about accounting technology, productivity tips, the latest trends, what's going on in apps. And this is available to you at newsletter.blakeoliver.com. We're doing the podcast edition, which confusingly is monthly rather than weekly, but the newsletter goes out weekly. And what we have done today is selected the 5 top stories from the past month, and my guest and I are going to discuss them and talk about what they mean for accountants. I'm Blake Oliver. I'm your host today. I am very recently the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Flowcast. I joined the company here in Los Angeles in December. You can follow me on Twitter at Blake T. Oliver, and my website is blakeoliver.com. But enough about me. I'm more interested in our guest today, David Leary. He is the Global Small Business Ecosystem Evangelist at Intuit and actually has a longer job title than I do, which is very refreshing. You can follow him on Twitter at David Leary and on the web at davidleary.com. David, thanks for being with us today.
Blake, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about this. I feel like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, you and I were chatting like, we should do a podcast together. Finally, we're doing one episode together like 2 years later.
And I am so excited to have you because you operate in the accounting tech world that is near and dear to my heart. It's been amazing to watch the QuickBooks Online ecosystem grow from a handful of apps to, how many is it now? Over 500?
Yeah, we have over 500 on apps.com, and I think there's another 2,000 integrations to QuickBooks Online, and I still feel like there's another 1,000 small business apps out there, right, that eventually should integrate with QuickBooks.
That's incredible. And all of this has happened.
There's a lot of action in our space. Yeah.
All of it's happened in a really short amount of time, right? I mean, we're talking, less than 10 years, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably a timeline of like 5, 6. I mean, I think some of the companies that are out there, they've been around 6, 7 years, but it doesn't have any momentum, right? Things didn't really start happening until probably like November 2013. I think is kind of the tipping point when things really started to take off for QuickBooks Online and all the app developers, et cetera.
And you've been with Intuit for quite a long time, right? How long have you been with Intuit, and how did you end up in this unique role?
So I've been in Intuit for 21 years. So how I got to this role, long story, but I took a job years ago in tech support. So I started out doing tech support for QuickBooks DOS 2.0 and the first QuickBooks Windows version, version 4. And so I did about 4 or 5 years of QuickBooks tech support, talked to 20,000 small business owners and accountants, and then I got involved in quality assurance, parlayed that into product management, got a little bit involved in engineering, just enough to know you don't want me coding things. The marketing, I've done almost everything related to QuickBooks except for commission sales. Like I've never actually had to sell QuickBooks in any of my roles. And then I got on to kind of what's a good, perfect fit for my skill set, which is I started to get involved with the developer team. And the developer team is a developer evangelist. You doing some of it's tech support, some of it's marketing. I tell people like I sell dreams to developers and I sell dreams to accountants about the cloud. And so that's where I've kind of evolved to this current title of a small business evangelist, because I really talk to accountants, developers, and small business owners all. I'm talking to the entire ecosystem, not just one silo of the ecosystem.
That's awesome. And I'm so glad that that's the case, because I'm sure you have a unique perspective on the stories that we're going to discuss today. So let's get right into it, shall we? For those of you who are new to the podcast, we select 5 of our top stories and just talk about them, share them with you, and share what happened and what we think the implications are for accounting professionals. So I'm going to go first. My story is a breaking news story from this morning, and it is about Kodak. So Kodak shares, this is a story on CNBC, they have more than tripled since the company announced its new cryptocurrency, which is called, quote, Kodak Coin, unquote. And This is just insane, if you ask me. There's been a lot of blockchain, Bitcoin insanity going on with the price of Bitcoin hitting ridiculous amounts over $10,000 and then going up and down over 25% from one day to the next. And I think this story just epitomizes the insanity going on in the blockchain world right now. Apparently, this coin is going to be, it doesn't even exist yet. Kodak has simply announced that it is going to exist in their shares of crypto. And the purpose of the currency is going to be to track for digital photography rights and royalties. David, am I insane, or has the world gone crazy?
I think the world's gone crazy, and as soon as you sent this to me, I was like, oh, like 2 days ago, I just heard about a different company, something called let's get it right. They are the iced tea company. They were out of New Jersey, I think, and they used to be the Long Island Iced Tea Corp, and they've changed their name to Long Blockchain, and their stock immediately skyrocketed. So it's kind of yes, I think we are in a little bit of an insane time when it comes to blockchain.
So yeah, that story is nuts too. There's another company that's been going around selling a coin different than Bitcoin. They created their own, just like Kodak is doing, and it has no value at all. They actually say this in their prospectus, that this coin doesn't give you any ownership stake in the company. It's a completely worthless, and yet they have raised something like $700 million in the last year doing this, and it's got to be just because everybody is hyped up on this and wants to get in, and there's just some really stupid money like floating around right now.
I've been listening to a lot of Planet Money podcasts about bubbles. They talk about all tons of bubbles, and the one I really think applies to this. Any article you see about Bitcoin, change the word Bitcoin with Beanie Baby, and the article still works. It's so weird, and it's part tongue in cheek, but at the same time, it shows kind of how crazy it is that you could stick the word Beanie Baby in the article completely, even if it has a quote from somebody justifying, right, the cost of a Bitcoin.
I think I'm going to have to go back.
It's the exact same statements.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go back to all the Beanie Baby stories and look for business opportunities now with blockchain, just using the same concepts.
That haven't been created yet, absolutely.
All right. Well,
but you have to be careful. I think in that other article about the ICT company, the SEC is starting to crack down on this game, though. So you can't just call yourself blockchain.
Oh, too bad. So we're late to the party. Oh well.
Yes.
Well, enough of that blockchain insanity. I wanted to share another article, and this is one that, full disclaimer, I wrote. It's on CPA Practice Advisor, published December 21st, so right before the break, about 5 predictions for accounting in 2008, one of those classic articles. What do we think is going to happen in the accounting profession? So I had a few predictions, not really worth sharing all of them here in this podcast, but I'll pick out my favorite. I think that so there's been a lot of hype about automation, AI, and machine learning over the past few years, and not actually very much has come of it, right? And I think that this is the year where we will finally start seeing some real applications of automation having to do with artificial intelligence and machine learning that are going to actually start replacing jobs at the staff level. And I believe this is going to happen based on my own experience, having started out my career as a bookkeeper. And that job is basically almost gone. The traditional job of data entry, keying in transactions, and it was a QuickBooks desktop job. That's what I was doing. And then the online product came out. No longer having to key transactions in, pulling them in via bank feeds, setting up rules and all that. Like, the job is gone. Or we may call it bookkeeping, but it's very different than it used to be. And I think that now that bookkeeping has been mostly automated, we're going to finally start seeing that happen with staff level accounting jobs. So in audit, for instance, maybe the work that's being done, at a very basic level, junior level, that sort of thing. So David, I'd love to get your thoughts on any of my predictions for 2018, or I know that you're writing an article that's going to be coming out soon. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's going to happen this year?
Possibly. I definitely thought you were number 4, the automation AI. When I saw that, I made myself a little note. I was like, you didn't really go out on a limb on this one too much. Like to me, it feels so obvious that this is coming, and maybe it won't replace jobs, but I think maybe accounting firms now have options. Like when they're like, hey, I need to hire a bookkeeper, or I need this extra work done, I could hire a bookkeeper, or I might be able to outsource that work to labor in another country, or I might be able to outsource that work to an app, right? Or some automated process that might handle this for me. So I think it's the decision's equal now, right? It wasn't where, hey, I just need to get a bookkeeper, I need somebody to do some data entry, and you just did it. But now you have the options of maybe I don't need to do that, and you're right, because that's now an option as a choice. You're right, it's probably going to affect staff, or impact the forced decision to hire staff. You now have the option to possibly not do it.
Exactly. And I'm curious to know, are there any, I remember at QuickBooks Connect, I wasn't able to make it this past year, but the year before, there was a lot of talk about AI. Is there anything being done right now with AI in the QuickBooks app that you can share with us?
I mean, there's definitely just the bank feeds, right? I think those are starting to push the 92, 93, 94% automated posting, right? And then if a lot of the accountants are tweaking those and squeezing them on a client by client basis and creating rules to where they're getting 100% of that automated. And then we're still always looking for other ways, right? Because there's still other data out there. People have data in MindBody. They have data in these other places that, currently a lot of people are massaging that manually. They're typing it in, they're massaging it, putting it through a spreadsheet, then putting it into the accounting system. And I think there's more and more things being built to automate those processes.
Awesome.
So it's kind of moving beyond bank feeds now, right? And it's not all done by us either, right? It's done by, lots of app developers, not just by what QuickBooks is doing.
Well, I think it's great. Anything we can do to get rid of that tedious work. I think I developed, terrible carpal tunnel from those days that will never go away. So anything we can do to make that automated. It's great. All right, next story. Oh, this is quite relevant. Intuit acquires TSheets for $340 million. Not exactly the freshest story. It is from early December, but I couldn't resist but include this in our discussion today, David, given your position at Intuit. Huge, big deal. A lot of people talking about this on social media. Really great for the TSheets team. Very happy for them. They had over 35,000 customers at the time of acquisition, according to this TechCrunch article. Anyway, and what's amazing is they had only raised 15 million up to that point. So taking 15 million and turning that into 340 million is pretty spectacular. And it still is one of the top QuickBooks apps on the App Store. And I understand that TSheets is going to become further integrated into QuickBooks with possibly being rebranded as Time Capture. So I'd love to get your take on this, David, as the ecosystem guy.
Yeah, so I don't have any inside track or any special information or anything like that. I just, the story of it's pretty amazing, right? Like I've known Matt and Brendan for a long time, and even when they first came on, when you think about it, then they had like 60 customers using TSheets and QuickBooks Online, right? And to think about where it's at now is really, really an amazing story. I did not know about the branding. Was that in the article? Maybe I just missed it about the branding on that part.
It's at the very end of the article, so I wasn't sure if that was correct or where they'd gotten that information from. But I did also hear that TSheets is going to stay a separate product. At least that's the plan.
And that's what I've heard as well. Yeah.
So, but there already is a deep integration with TSheets in QuickBooks. So, right, it's a native. How do you describe those, like the Bill.com, the TSheets inside of QuickBooks? Do you have a name for that?
It's using the UI plugin, right? Like we would love to maybe possibly do it with lots and lots, but so it's kind of an early test. But yeah, where the UI of QuickBooks is an integration point instead of just the data through the API.
Got it.
So we're trying to do more of. One thing I thought was interesting about this acquisition versus, I know Intuit's done acquisitions in the past, and we've saw in the past. And one thing I think that's interesting about this one is it's a culture fit. what I mean by that is like I really look at TSheets and I'm like, they treat customers, they treat small developers, they treat accountants the same way we do as at Intuit. I know we've done these we bought. I know, right? I remember going to Manforce and I was like, wow, this is like a boiler room, right? Their sales department was like, it just from a culture perspective, like I'm not sure this is going to work in the long term, right? So that's one of the things as far as like when these acquisitions like this happen, you always wonder how's it going to work. But because I think they have the same core values and the way they treat people, I think that's what's going to help this.
Awesome. Well, congrats again to the TSheets team, and best of luck to them. And hopefully there will be some great. I'm really hoping for serious job costing as a result of a deeper integration with TSheets. And I think that's the thing that's been holding back a lot of QuickBooks Desktop users from moving to the cloud, has been having the ability to cost out labor in a really, really easy way. So that's my hope if anyone is listening.
Yeah, I also think it's going to help all that self-employed group as well.
Yes.
I think that the QuickBooks self-employed app, it does mileage, it does personal business expenses, but you can't really track time on it.
Yep.
And I think that's another piece of this that'll help. And yeah, I think it would be nice if TSheets did, instead of companies do a stock buyback, maybe TSheets will do a t-shirts buyback, and we could all benefit from this sale.
Makes sense. All right, moving on. Number 4 on our list of top stories. This is an article on the Signal versus Noise blog, which is run by the guys who started Basecamp. Basecamp is a popular project management application that's very affordable and really, really well designed. And they write a lot of excellent content that's not just about the product, it's about how to be more productive in general. So I follow them on their Medium blog. I highly recommend that you do as well. And the article I'd like to share today is called "It's Time for Recurring Meetings to End. Why Are We Still Doing This to Each Other?" And for those of you who are listening in to the podcast, not live, and can't see my screen, there's a funny e-card here that says, it's a picture of 4 people sitting at a conference room table, and the caption is, "We will continue having lots of meetings until we find out why no work is getting done." So this is near and dear to my heart because I hate long-standing meetings, and it's actually one of the reasons why Flowcast was developed, because our founder was sitting in long stand-up meetings. Well, they weren't stand-up meetings because they were so long, just long conference room meetings every week, multiple times per week during the monthly close. And the purpose of the meetings was just for everyone to stay on track. So he thought, let's create an app so that everyone can stay on track without having to have these 4-hour meetings twice a week. And that's just one particular, instance of this philosophy in action. Basecamp, of course, is a very, excellent, wide ranging application that fits a lot of needs that does the same thing. So, that's I agree with this. If you are in a firm that has lots of standing meetings, go find this article on the Signal v. Noise blog, send this to all the partners at your firm, or send this to everyone in your company, because it might help convince them to switch away. David, I'd love to get your thoughts on this.
I thought it's an interesting article because he really calls out like the slippery slope of this, right? Well, there's a lot of illogical parts of it. Just having the meetings on your calendar is illogical and not productive. Even if you cancel the meeting at the last minute and nobody has to go to the meeting, like he just really addresses everything about this. It's illogical. But one thing I didn't think he brought up is that in the day and age now, like everybody's on Slack, right? People are communicating on an instantaneous basis daily for a team, to where do you even need to meet because everybody kind of is already on the same page, and if they're not, they're just going to type something in the Slack group to get back on the same page as everybody else if they're confused or behind on something. So it just seems, in this day and age, he has a point. Maybe it is time, and I've never been to a meeting ever at Intuit.
You've never been to a what? A meeting?
No, a meeting. Yeah. That's all we do sometimes. I feel like get into it.
Oh,
it could be a very, very powerful thing if people try to do it a little bit more.
Well, it's a cultural thing, right? And I think it makes sense if you started working somewhere and collaboration tools didn't exist and the only thing you had was email, then you really had no choice but to have standing meetings. It was the only way to keep people on track because email doesn't work for that, right? But with tools like Basecamp, with Slack, shameless self-promotion with Flowcast, you don't necessarily need that anymore, right? You don't need to have that standing meeting, or at least as many of them, because you can simply have a status update done, asynchronously. You can send a message to the group that says, hey, what's the status of this? And everyone can give the status, and then you can move on.
Yeah, there's probably been an app, I bet, for Slackers, and then it just goes harvests out and can determine what the status of a project is just by looking at the conversations.
Yeah. That's one of the features of Basecamp that I really like, which is it's called check-ins on Basecamp 3. So you can specify for the app to email everyone a question on a daily or weekly basis, and then it'll compile all the answers into a thread. So the status could simply be like, is there anything getting in your way this week? And it could go out on like Thursday or something. And then everyone replies, and there you have it, right? You've done part of the standing meeting that you have to have. Oh, hey, we have a comment from our friend Patti Sharp, who's listening. Hey, Patti, how are you doing? Patti says, I'd argue you don't really need meetings, but you definitely need group events for building culture. I think that's a very fair point. Having run my own virtual accounting firm, which is how I got to know Patti, and having worked in another one, I would say that when you're totally virtual and you're not seeing people, then that's a problem, right? You don't have culture. Hard to build culture. So I guess there should be a distinction, right, between recurring meetings or meetings where it's just the point is to get on track with your work, and meetings where the point is to build culture.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Patti, and thanks for listening. All right, we're getting close to the top of the hour, or actually it's the bottom of the hour because we're trying to do this in 30 minutes. So I'm going to move on to our final story of the day, which has to do with the Internal Revenue Service, everyone's favorite topic. But actually, I couldn't believe this. It's my favorite thing combined with my least favorite thing in one article. The title is How a Simple Tech Upgrade at the IRS Could Transform the Economy. This is an article on TechCrunch published on December 30th. And what it's about is it's about legislation that's been introduced in Congress by Patrick McHenry and Cory Booker. So it's a bipartisan bill to force the Internal Revenue Service to create an API, an application, application protocol interface or something like that. All I know is that's what's going to allow vendors, other companies, to plug into the IRS database and pull information with your authorization. So the idea is that instead of having to file a paper form 4506T with the IRS in order to get your tax transcripts sent to somebody, like say you're trying to get a mortgage, you would simply authorize using personal information, and then that mortgage company would be able to get that information digitally, right? Just the same way that we can authorize QuickBooks to connect to our bank, right? Via some of the integrations, I think, with like B of A and Wells Fargo, right? They're highly automated. You just put in your username and password and it happens, right? So I'm very excited about this. What do you think, David?
Mixed emotions, right? Like at some level, I agree with it as a citizen of the country, right? This kind of makes sense. It's efficient, but I also know that like it's very hard to build an API. It's very hard to maintain an API, especially if like after the fact, right? And I can look at, if you build a product from scratch today, you'll probably build it with the thought of having an API from day one, and you'll architect it that way to have a scalable, good working API. But if you have something existing, like a computer system that was designed to be closed for the last 30 years, and then decide we're going to add an open API to it, it's a lot easier to write a bill in Congress than probably to actually make that happen.
Oh, interesting.
I think this can be very, very tough. The other thing about the article deeper in, though, which I thought was interesting, is how the EU is requiring banks to open up their APIs, which I find very interesting because that has been kind of a struggle. This is where, there's a lot of this concept, some people probably have heard of it, screen scraping, right? Mm-hmm. And so for QuickBooks, right, QuickBooks Online, for some of the banks, we can connect to the bank and download the transactions. For some, we have to just go to, in a way, it's like going to the web browser, signing in as you figuring out where the bank transactions are, scraping them, and then sucking those down because they don't have APIs available. So I thought that actually was more interesting in this article to me, the fact that the EU is starting to require that banks open up their data via APIs.
I would love to see that, because you can always tell when a bank feed is using screen scraping, because that's when you have missing transactions or duplicated transactions, or the feed just stops working all of a sudden, right? Because the bank changed its layout, something like that.
They got a new logo and it just broke the whole page. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's all it takes with the screen scraping.
But I'm sure there's just an army of people over at Intuit that have to deal with that kind of problem. This would save a lot of duplicated effort at all sorts of cloud accounting vendors who do this.
Yeah, and on top of that, I think an API access to banks like this is just more efficient for the banks.
Interesting.
Because then we only ping, like right now, we have to ping every bank for every transaction blindly. We just don't know. Well, it's like, hey, you're knocking on the door. Are there new transactions to download? Are there new transactions to download? But to do that, we have to connect, sign in, go see the transactions, and make that decision ourselves. Versus the other way, think about it, if they have an API, they could push it. Like we could just subscribe, like, hey, this client X is connected to this Bank of America website, and it could push, hey, there's new transactions, come download them. So in a way, it's actually very efficient for the banks, because we're not, when I say we're, like thousands of us as software providers and accountants aren't banging on the door of the bank constantly trying to download transactions that may not be there.
Yeah, Katie Preston agrees with you. She thinks it would be awesome to have all the banks participate, and I also agree. I think we should put that legislation in front of this legislation. David, how do we create a bill and get that in front of Congress?
There's probably an app for that. We'll have to track that down.
Yeah, exactly. We need an app for creating legislation. Well, David, I want to thank you for all your time today and for sharing your thoughts. That's all our time we've got. If you want to listen again live, we are going to be back here on CPA Academy recording live in February. I believe that is February 7th. And you can use the same registration link for this episode, which will be posted in the show notes, and you can participate and ask questions, all that good stuff. And if you would like to find out more about my company, you can visit us at flowcast.com. We're closed management software built by accountants for accountants. So meaning we got sick of life in public accounting, and we said, let's do something about why this sucks so much. And so now we're building an app to do that. You can visit me personally at blakeoliver.com. And David, David, where can folks reach you?
Easiest is on Twitter. It's just at David Leary, or you can go to my website for my newsletter. Like I said, I'll probably try to get predictions out this Saturday. I have a picked up, just not hit send yet. And you can just go to davidleary.com to subscribe there.
Awesome. Thanks again, David. And Matt, tossing it back to you.